You're here! We've missed you!
Ah, look, presents!
Merry Christmas!
The wind screamed across the Wyoming prairie on that Christmas Eve, rattling our thin cabin door while I clutched my little daughter, Eliza, close, knowing the cupboard was completely bare and our hearts just as empty. My husband, a good man and hard-working rancher, had been buried under a late autumn landslide 6 months ago. And since that devastating day, our world had been nothing but grief, hunger, and endless silence. Eliza, only 5 years old with her father's bright eyes, had stopped asking for stories or sweets, and seeing her tiny shoulders slump with a sadness far too heavy for a child tore my soul into ragged pieces. That freezing evening, I had scraped together the last of the flour to make a single pan of hardtack, but even that was gone, and I whispered an apology to God for failing to give my daughter a proper Christmas dinner. The little pine sprig I'd hung above the hearth was a pitiful decoration, and as the snow piled higher against the window, I resigned myself to the fact that this would be the bleakest, most desolate night of our entire lives. I was just tucking Eliza into our shared bed, her small body shivering despite the thin quilt when a firm, hesitant knock echoed through the cabin, making us both freeze with equal parts terror and fragile curiosity. Now, before we discover the miracle waiting on the other side of that door, please take a second to subscribe to Stories Hub Official and ring the bell so you never miss a heartwarming frontier story that restores your faith in love. I opened the door a crack, the frigid air biting my cheeks, and there stood a stranger, a tall cowboy with snow dusting his wide shoulders and a thick burlap sack slung over his arm like a man carrying treasure. His eyes, the color of warm coffee, held a gentle loneliness that instantly silenced my fear, and he removed his dripping Stetson before speaking in a voice as steady as hoofbeats on solid earth. He introduced himself as Cole Tanner, a drifting cowhand who had been riding past when he saw our lamplight flickering weakly in the storm and felt a sudden, unexplainable pull to stop and check on the inhabitants. Then he lifted the sack, its sides bulging, and explained that he had been saving a Christmas feast from the generous rancher who employed him, but he had no family to share it with and hoped we might welcome company. Before I could stammer a reply, he knelt down and pulled out a roasted chicken, fresh bread, potatoes, dried apples, and a tiny jar of honey, and my daughter's gasp of pure disbelieving joy shattered the long silence of our sorrow. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I invited him inside, and while the storm howled outside, this lonely cowboy set about laying the most magnificent Christmas dinner our humble table had ever held or even dreamed of holding. We ate together by the flickering hearth, the cabin filling with warm laughter as Cole coaxed shy smiles from Eliza with a little wooden horse he'd whittled in his lonely camp, a gift he insisted was just gathering dust. He told us his story between bites of bread, how he'd lost his own family to fever years ago and had wandered ever since, never finding a place that felt like home until something about our light in the storm called to him. I shared my own tale of widowhood and struggle, and his attentive silence was so full of compassion that it felt like the first time I'd truly been heard since my husband's coffin was lowered into the frozen ground. The hours melted away, and when the storm finally eased past midnight, I offered him a spot in the barn with the old horse, but something in the way he looked at me made my heart flutter with a hope I'd thought was long buried. The next morning, Christmas Day, he didn't ride away as I'd expected. Instead, he was already chopping firewood when we woke, stacking a pile that would last a month, his breath puffing white in the crisp dawn air. He stayed through the new year, fixing the broken corral fence and repairing the leaky roof, insisting he was just repaying a dinner, but his eyes followed me with a tenderness that spoke a language far deeper than words. Cole became a fixture on our little homestead, and each evening he'd sit on the porch whittling while Eliza played at his feet, and I'd catch myself smiling for no reason as I hung laundry on the line he rebuilt. One February night, under a sky bursting with stars, he took my trembling hand and confessed that he'd fallen in love with both of us, the widow and the child, and that his wandering heart had finally found its permanent destination. I wept with a joy I'd never known, and when he knelt down and asked me to be his wife, promising to cherish Eliza as his own flesh and blood, the word yes leaped from my lips before he could even finish the beautiful sentence. We were married in early spring under the budding cottonwoods, with Eliza scattering wildflowers down the aisle and the entire valley turning out to celebrate the cowboy who had knocked on a door and never left. Cole built a sturdy new bedroom onto the cabin with his own 2 hands, and the first night we slept as a true family, Eliza snuggled between us. I realized the true meaning of a full heart and a full home. He taught Eliza to ride a gentle pony he'd traded for, and her squeals of delight echoed across the pastures that had once known only silence, turning our ranch into a place of vibrant, unstoppable laughter. With Cole's steady work and gentle guidance, the ranch began to flourish, the herds growing strong and the garden yielding more than we could eat, which we joyfully shared with any neighbor in need. Every Christmas Eve after that, we would retell the story of the lonely cowboy and his miraculous sack of food, placing a small pine sprig above the door in memory of the night our lives were utterly transformed. Eliza, now a bright-eyed girl who never missed a chance to ride beside her father, would always add that Cole didn't just bring dinner. He brought himself, and that was the greatest gift of all. When our twin boys were born 2 years later, Cole wept like a child as he held them, whispering that the family he'd lost had been restored tenfold through a knock on a stranger's door on a snowy night. The old cabin grew into a sprawling, warm home filled with the aroma of fresh bread and the sound of children's prayers, and not a single person in the county could deny the miracle that had unfolded there. Cole became a respected elder in the community, known for his fairness and his habit of opening our home to any drifter who needed a hot meal, just as he had once been the lonely cowboy looking for a light in the storm. I often watched him from the kitchen window, his hair silvered now but his shoulders still strong, and marveled at how a man who had once been a stranger now felt like the very heartbeat of my entire world. One December evening, decades later, Cole took my aged hand and told me that seeing our dim light through the blizzard that night had been the moment. God finally answered his prayers for a family to call his own. I reminded him that we had been the ones with nothing, no dinner, and no hope, and that his arrival had been the embodiment of the Christmas spirit, a feast of love delivered straight to our door. Our children, now grown with families of their own, insisted we write down the story, and it became a cherished legend passed down to grandchildren who would listen with wide eyes beside the crackling fire. The tale of the lonely cowboy who knocked with a feast and never left traveled beyond our valley, becoming a symbol of hope for those who face cold winters with empty cupboards and heavier hearts. When Cole passed peacefully at 82, surrounded by the family that adored him, I placed a single pine sprig in his hands, and I knew his journey home was finally and forever complete. I lived on in the home he built, telling our story to anyone who would listen, because I believed with every fiber of my being that such goodness deserved to echo through every generation that followed. This Christmas saga of a cowboy's knock and a widow's answered prayer reminds us all that sometimes the most magnificent feasts aren't the ones laid on tables, but the ones laid in hearts that find each other. If this story of holiday hope and enduring love touched your spirit, please take a moment to press that like button and share this video with someone who needs to believe in second chances and Christmas miracles. We'd be honored to hear your own stories of unexpected kindness. Have you ever had a stranger become family, or a knock on the door change everything? Drop your reflections in the comments below. Your engagement with these wholesome frontier tales fuels our mission at Stories Hub Official to bring light and love into a world that sometimes feels as cold as that Wyoming blizzard. Make sure you're subscribed and have the notification bell turned on, so you'll be the first to know when a new legend of love and courage rides into view on our channel. Every like, every comment, and every subscription helps us reach more lonely hearts who might be on the verge of their own Christmas Eve miracle. just waiting for the right knock to sound. Thank you for spending this time with Sarah, Eliza, and Cole, the cowboy who proved that the best gifts don't fit under a tree, but walk through your door with snow on their shoulders and love in their hands. Until we meet again around the next campfire, keep your doors open, your hearts ready, and your faith alive that the most beautiful chapters are often written when we least expect them. Remember, no matter how empty your table or how quiet your home, a miracle could already be riding toward you through the storm, carrying a feast that will nourish far more than your body. This is Stories Hub Official, where every frontier saga is a reminder that courage, kindness, and love are the truest currencies of the human soul, and we are so grateful to have you riding along with us. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let the story of the lonely cowboy who never left inspire you to be the miracle someone else is praying for this very night. From our heart to yours, have a blessed and hope-filled season, and we'll see you in the next beautiful, soul-stirring Western romance right here on Stories Hub Official.